Okay, folks, this is probably the most important panel here, I would argue, at the Delphi Economic Forum. If you're here, you're probably familiar and have heard of the IMEC corridor. This is an idea that would link from India to the United States, several major nations through a trade route corridor. I've spoken with both President Trump and Prime Minister Mitsotakis here about the IMEC corridor and how important it is. I want to read out a couple of quotes about this, and then we're going to go down the list here and talk to each of our distinguished panelists about this. But one of the things that President Trump, I was with him in the Oval Office a few weeks ago at the White House, and he said, quote, "This is a group of wonderful nations that is countering other countries that look to hurt us on trade." Obviously, we're seeing the actions from President Trump on trade recently, and he seems to be very focused on China. He didn't use the word China in our interview, but I think we all know what he's talking about. And as for Prime Minister Mitsotakis, he told me, quote, "As far as Greece is concerned, we have a strategic partnership with the United States, and when I look at IMEC, Greece, the birthplace of democracy, can be the bridge between the world's largest democracy, that's India, and the most powerful, strongest democracy, that's the United States." So really historic opportunities here. So I want to start with the Deputy Minister here. Deputy Minister, can you talk to us a little bit about the energy that we're seeing here behind this, in this new Trump administration in Washington behind this project?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, all of the participants in this panel. If we're talking about a new world architecture, security architecture, I think IMEC is a very crucial component of that. The Greek Prime Minister put it, I highlighted the Greek position as connecting the oldest and the most popular democracies, but it's something much bigger also between than that. It's connecting, is using the sea and the freedom of navigation and freedom of trade and free trade to connect Asia, the Middle East, Europe. And all this presents almost half of world trade. It's a community of nations representing around a big chunk of world population. It's connecting the developing part of the world with the developed part of the world, and also is the best way to bring peace, stability, and prosperity to all of us. And to this extent, is something, it's the way to the future. This is where we should build, this is where we should direct our efforts, and this is the best guarantee we have for a better future for all of us.
So Gautam, we were talking out in the hall about India in particular. India, obviously, one of the major, where this starts, right? Like on the eastern side of the world. Can you tell us a little bit about India's role in the formation of IMEC, where things stand now, and some of the challenges that we face moving forward in terms of getting this thing rolling and off the ground?
I think basically governments need to come together to start the project. I think in spirit everybody is on board, there is no problem. But after the new President Trump is here, I'm mildly skeptical that how committed he is to IMEC. If he is committed, then we are looking at a $52 trillion combined GDP, and you take any number, 10%, 20%, and that would be the trade that would happen through IMEC. In addition, I think, suppose America decides to go back and doesn't want to stay, then I think IMEC should go on its own strength, because the balance is about $25 trillion worth of GDP, and we should do it for ourselves. So I don't, if America is there, I think it will be excellent, because not only will it add economic might, but it will also help. There was a globalization that had gone rogue under Belt and Road Initiative, and nobody's talking about that right now. And I think if IMEC works over the next 3 years, then we have potential to expand that to get into something like Africa, and then further on to South America. I think IMEC is a crucial institution that needs to be invested in and taken forward today, keeping the next quarter century in mind.
So Geoffrey, do you see it similarly as a counter to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative here? Where do we stand now? I know you worked in the previous administration and in the Trump administration before. So talk to us a little bit about where we stand now in terms of getting this done, and also how you see it in terms of the bigger, broader geopolitical equation.
At a tactical level, it's very much part of the answer to the checkbook diplomacy that China has been deploying with its Belt and Road Initiative. But it's also a strategic initiative of the highest order, as Gautam pointed out. This is about building economic opportunity, looking to the future, and it's just like if we look at the 20th century, the transformative impact of the Suez Canal, of the Panama Canal, before that, the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States. This has a similar level of ambition, but built for the 21st century economy, which brings together data flows, energy flows, the flow of goods. It's particularly important that Greece has taken this leadership role, and I remember during my time as ambassador talking with Prime Minister Mitsotakis, Deputy Foreign Minister Papadopoulou will remember those conversations about India, and this was something Prime Minister Mitsotakis really was running with, also Foreign Minister Dendias. But it's striking to me, I was sharing with Gautam when I was last in Delhi, and I've lived in Delhi for, I guess, 8 years total of my diplomatic career. You talked to Foreign Minister Jaishankar. India is very, very serious about the IMEC corridor as a strategic initiative. And then also looking to the Gulf. It was striking to me when I was in Riyadh how serious the Saudis are with the capital that they can deploy through PIF about their investment in the IMEC corridor. Same with UAE. And with both of those governments, you have very large investment funds, Mudabala, PIF, which, by the way, are both also present and involved here in Greece. So there's a real transformative opportunity here. I think on the U.S. government side, I am extremely proud of the work we did in the Trump administration, followed through in the Biden administration with our Development Finance Corporation to invest in the rebirth of Greek shipping, and in particular, the Elefsina shipyard. This is at a much higher level of ambition, and the challenge we face, especially in India and the United States, is that success on a project like this requires not government capital, but private capital. So we have to get our companies involved, and that's where the involvement of big Indian industrial groups like Adani and Tata matters, and where we all have to work together to figure out who are the American versions of those counterparts.
So Ebtesam, and correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation there, can you, obviously UAE is a party to not just the IMEC corridor, but to the Abraham Accords. Obviously the title of this panel is Reviving the Abraham Accords. I don't think they died, for whatever it's worth. I think they're still there, but October 7th really set us back in terms of the continuation and expansion of the Abraham Accords. So talk to us a little bit about the importance of the Gulf nations that are part of this IMEC corridor, and is there hope here that other players in the Arab world, particularly the Saudis, they're the big ones, are they going to join possibly the Abraham Accords, or are they open to doing so on the horizon?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I don't think the Saudi, they want to join the Abrahamic Accord. They want, if it's normalization, they don't want Abrahamic Accord itself. But they were about to normalize with Israel. But what happened in Gaza put them off. Then when it start the negotiation again, when Netanyahu said that the Palestinian will be transferred or should move to Saudi, also he put them off again. So I talk frankly here, the Saudi, they don't want the normalization, they want what they want to get from United States. the military agreement, the Japan position, the arms. It's different what UAE wants. UAE model of power, of economic model, based that if the region is in conflict, in war, that model will not work. So that's why connectivity, it is very important for UAE. In the DNA of Abrahamic Accords that we will create an arc of economic prosperity where everybody will be, it's a win-win for everybody, for Palestinian, for the Israeli, for the Arabs, and the young generation will find a better future. Now, it is like my friend Baharoun here saying, IMEC is moving from geopolitics to geoeconomics, where in the economy, you can bring everybody to a win-win instead of zero-sum in the geopolitics. And that's why that initiative, starting bringing Asia to Europe, it needs everybody to work on it. It's not only the Gulf. Maybe the facilities UAE have, it's a hub in terms of ports, in terms of infrastructure. It can connect both Asia and Europe in it. But it is not only one nation, one country. It needs everybody to work to stabilize the region so this IMEC can be work, so you can revive also the Abrahamic Accord. You can expand it to other nations, but without stability. If the wars is going, if there is some like either Palestinian or Israeli is not living in a peace, you cannot go on with that.
Mm-hmm. So Anita, kind of take us from here. What are some of the things that the two major powers on either side of this corridor, you've got the United States in the west, you have India in the east, can do to really get things moving here, right? Like, what would be your advice to President Trump? What would be your advice to Prime Minister Modi? How do they get things off the ground here?
Thank you, and hello to everybody here. As far as India is concerned, I think Prime Minister Modi's address to the ASEAN-India Summit on 7th of September 2023, just 24 hours before the signing of the IMEC, is something worth noting as to how India sees IMEC moving forward. That is to say, the framework, the larger framework of IMEC has been set up under the PGII, which also has a very, very G7 kind of a hand-holding. But within the PGII, when IMEC is set up, how do you operationalize IMEC? What is the model, the framework on which this sort of an economic connectivity will work? And that's what Prime Minister said. He could not name IMEC because it was going to be signed 24 hours later, but he did say, it is my vision to see Southeast Asia and East Asia connected with India and to West Asia and Europe, and through a multimodal connectivity in which logistics, energy, new supply chains will be the keywords. So only the word IMEC is missing in this statement. And he comes back to the G20 Leaders Summit, and the IMEC was signed there. Now, the thing about IMEC is that it is actually, in some sense, a culmination of the quest for the new supply chains, the resilient supply chains, the transparent, secure, diversified value chains that all important economies of the world are looking for. This quest has become even more prominent in the post-COVID phase. And please do remember that 2023 was the first year after COVID when full G20 meeting and G7 meetings were held in full presence of all the leaders. So, which is why these signing of IMEC, these principles of GVC, both in G7 and in G20, they are not isolated events. They are all interconnected with the sort of the policy, a conversation that is happening between leaders, followed very quickly by the Greek Prime Minister's speech in Ricina in February of 2024, where he brought in the philosophy of IMEC back again, which Minister herself has now reminded us of. The democracy, the connecting the democracies, working under peaceful conditions towards prosperity for all. And within this framework also lies the diversification of economies in UAE, Saudi, who are looking to diversify their own economies. So this is a whole chain which is linked at different levels. But if you work this whole idea into a research framework, which is basically my job at this moment, I'm developing the research framework for IMEC, you can see the whole value chain of the plan itself is emerging through these connecting dots. And I will stop here. I'm very happy to elaborate on any of the points that I made. But I will bring one last thought here, since you mentioned the, President Trump, that withdrawing from the idea of IMEC at this point of time will actually be withdrawing from the entire exercise that G7 and G20, all these important economies are working for, have been working for several years now. And I'm not saying IMEC is the answer to all these questions, but in great part, it answers a lot of important policy deliberations that have been happening in these forums. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Deputy Minister, on that note, and by the way, I don't think President Trump is withdrawing from IMEC. I think that he is doubling down on it. He signed a deal when Prime Minister Modi visited him at the beginning of his administration. He signed a deal furthering it, and like I said, I talked to him about it a few weeks ago in the White House. He called it a group of wonderful nations, and talked about how if anything, I think it might be the answer to like what he's trying to do here on trade with China and so on and so forth. Frankly, that seems to be similar to what the Prime Minister was saying this week in his remarks in his interview with me. Deputy Minister, your thoughts?
I don't think President Trump is withdrawing. On the contrary, I have the feeling that he's betting on that. He elevates that into a key project of his presidency, at least at this moment. And I want to repeat that this is not only economic, it's deeply strategic. And also it has big political implications in the fact that by combining economic resources and from different countries, it helps a lot the peace process in the Middle East, and also helps a lot bring together three regions: South Asia, Middle East, and Europe, South Europe, and through South Europe, the rest of Europe together. And this is a major project worth betting our money on it. Greece, as the Prime Minister said, having served as a bridge throughout our history between these regions of the world, we have the ambition to continue playing this role, and we base this role on our strategic relationship with Israel and our strategic relationship with India, also our deep and age-long political relationship with the Arab countries, and of course our membership to the European Union, and furthermore our strategic relationship with the United States. No, I think President Trump and the U.S. administration, and I think even successive U.S. administrations see the value of the project. And, we saw this trend on the 3+1 project, which started under Trump 1. And continued under Biden, continues even today. The 3+1, I would say, was the nascent form of a cooperation in the region on which IMEC is based. Of course, expanded with a different scope, a different strategic and political and economic implications. But still, you see this trend from the Trump, Biden, now Trump, and I don't think I hope the U.S. will continue in this direction, because it's very normal that this part of the world, which throughout history has been the heart of economic activity and political stability for the entire world, is revived and gotten together. The sticking together of these different parts, different countries, but with a certain common goal that has implications on so many fronts, is at the heart of any efforts to create any new world security architecture.
So Gautam, I know you're skeptical on Trump, right?
Aren't you? Given his track record, I think everybody in the room should be healthy. There should be healthy skepticism around whatever.
Sure. But what I would say is, obviously, he has a deep personal relationship with your Prime Minister Modi, and I would imagine that Prime Minister Modi is very committed to this project. And so, can you tell us a little bit about how that relationship between the two of them? And one of the things we've seen some folks from the Indian government. I think the Commerce Secretary was out there saying about Trump's actions on trade this past week or so represent a huge opportunity. I think he said it was the opportunity of a lifetime for India. So India's response has been a little bit different than some of the rest of the world. So can you talk to us a little bit about how that relationship can help maybe keep this on the level?
Okay, sure, I'll answer that question. But before that, since two of my colleagues have brought in the strategic aspects of IMEC, I just wanted to deepen that conversation a bit, which is that neither EU nor India, despite EU being large in size, India, one of the fastest growing economies at scale, have an articulated grand strategy. And I think the IMEC could be one tiny leg of experimenting on a grand strategy around, let's say, geo-infrastructure that can lead to geo-economics, trade, and finally towards geopolitics. This would be a fantastic experiment if we get our act together, both the EU as well as India. Coming to your question, being in the center of things, these opportunities, India has a very terrific habit of missing opportunities. And I sincerely hope we don't miss this opportunity. If our Trade Minister Piyush Goyal is saying that this is an opportunity and we should go ahead, I sincerely hope he does. But the last great opportunity that we sort of embraced was of crisis in 1991, during which we began our economic reforms. Now, under Narendra Modi, I feel there is a greater political will to grab opportunities and take India forward. And as you suggest, IMEC could be one of those things. And finally, as far as the relationship goes between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald J. Trump, I think neither of the two nations is, it's good to have a friendly conversation. But beyond that, neither of the two nations, for Narendra Modi, it's India first.
Sure.
For Donald Trump, it's America first, and there is no contradiction between the two firsts. We just need to come to an intersection in terms of Venn diagrams where the two firsts become double firsts. And I don't think that's going to be very difficult. IMEC could pretty much be the starting experiment on how America first and India first work together.
Right. So, Geoffrey, can you tell? We've seen the some of these other bigger trade deals that were negotiated over the previous years, like back during the Obama administration, like a TPP or a TTIP, those have fallen apart. How does this one stay alive and stay focused here? And I think that what Gautam's saying here about the intersections between the two sides of this, of the priorities of the United States and the priorities of India might be the answer. So how do we figure out where that Venn diagram intersects?
Right, so let me start, Matt, with a key point which is embedded in your question, which is if we look at the world as it is today, one of the great historic strengths of the United States and American diplomacy was our ability to build coalitions, to build networks. China has tried to challenge that through initiatives like the Belt and Road. I think we are seeing today the limits to China's strategy. I spent a lot of time in my previous role in the State Department traveling in Africa. Usually, I would be visiting countries where much more senior Chinese diplomats had recently met with the president. Every time I would have one of those kind of meetings in Africa, the host leader would say, Ambassador, I'm just really glad that the United States is showing up. And I think as we look to the future, that's what we need to make sure continues to happen. The U.S. continues to play that catalytic role. One aspect that's really interesting about this IMEC project, and as I look to my left at both my friend Deputy Minister Papadopoulou and Gautam, both India and Greece are countries that have seen dramatic improvement of the bilateral relationship with the United States. Gautam will remember when I first went to India in the 1990s, there was a famous monograph written about U.S.-India relations called Yankee Go Home, But Take Me With You. And that sort of captured where things were in those days. We're in a very different U.S.-India relationship. Another thing that happened during that time was one of the ambassadors I worked for gave a speech that he will always be remembered for, where he described U.S.-India relations as being flat as a chapati, so a flatbread. Today, U.S.-India relations are dramatically expanded. Proud point for me, a lot of that expansion is in India trade. I think Deputy Minister Papadopoulou would say much of the same about the U.S.-Greece relationship. We have seen extraordinary progress. But as we look to the future, what's really going to drive it is the companies. And I come back to that point, that I think how we leverage the leadership at the executive level matters in terms of opening the door. But what's really going to make a project like IMEC come to fruition and deliver results is how our companies deploy themselves. Now, of course, a huge Indian conglomerate like an Adani or a Tata or a deep-pocketed Gulf fund like Mudabala operates at a different scale from Indian companies. But I talked yesterday about the fascinating transformation we see as even Indian companies, or excuse me, as even Greek companies from a much smaller country are continuing to expand their global role. So you see the role that PPC, for instance, is playing across the Western Balkans, the role that a conglomerate like Kopalouzos is playing in Egypt, working on the Gregi project. And I'm looking at former Deputy Foreign Minister Varvasiotis in front of me, which is a reminder also of Greece's most successful global industry, which is shipping. The fact that Indian ship owners are 20% of global LNG carrying capacity is an extraordinary statistic. And there's an interesting nexus with Saudi Arabia, UAE, big oil and gas producers, and India, a country which will be the world's single largest driver of energy demand in the decades ahead. Think about that for a second. There is no country in the world that is going to have a bigger impact on global energy flows or global energy demand than India. So that creates a natural nexus with Greek shipping.
Mm-hmm. So,
can I just comment?
Sure, yeah.
You mentioned the China going down. For 120 countries, China is the biggest trading partner even today. So let us say China, there is a US-China decoupling, beginning through trade and maybe getting on to capital and other related issues. How long this decoupling and how much it trickles down into other trading partners at a time when US is not really the most trustworthy partner. Until yesterday, China was the bully in the room. Today, it's been replaced by US. So this is the new game, which I may agree with you in terms of wishful thinking. But in terms of raw data, 120 countries having with China as its largest trading partner is a big deal. Yeah. And I don't know how long or how many years that could take to shuffle back.
Yeah, so Ebtesam, getting back to the Middle East portion of this, because I really do think that the Middle East is one of the key elements of this whole idea. One of the things we've seen so far this year as the Trump administration has taken office is we've seen several senior administration officials traveling to Saudi Arabia. They've been hosting talks between the Russians and the Ukrainians there. I've talked to the Secretary of State about this. I've asked him if it's any accident that they're doing that in Saudi Arabia. He says no. Like they are intending to really focus on bringing the Saudis to the table, whether it's the Abraham Accords or trade agreements and unlocking this broader economic cooperation throughout the region. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience from UAE's involvement in signing on to the Abraham Accords, because obviously UAE was one of the major nations that signed on to them, and kind of what to look for in terms of signs from whether it be the United States, India, other major partners along this as this, the next stages of IMEC take hold?
Well, I think Abrahamic Accord is alliance showing tolerance, moderation, and UAE started before that by many initiatives, it created, and it ended by Abrahamic House after signing the. For UAE, as I said, I mean any initiative like IMEC, moving from geopolitics to geoeconomics, you need to pave the way, because this region lived in long time in hatred between its component, although it lived before also in a peaceful Muslim, Jews, Christians, Sunni, Shia, they lived together. Then when the colonialism happened, that meant the diversity between the people. So yes, the Gulf itself between India, Israel, Europe, it can be a connector between both. Trump, the Saudi, they have their own condition that without two-state solution, they cannot sign the normalization with Israel, which is, it doesn't look that it can be materialized now, because war is still in Gaza. First, you have to stop the war, then bringing peace, then you can sign looking for a normalization. This is the condition where the Saudi putting, and it doesn't seem that this can happen, but many things can happen. I mean, this IMEC can be going. You have other alternatives also. It can go through Egypt, through Suez Canal, until that war can happen. You can bring Egypt in that corridor. The more you get states, countries to that, the more you can expand that and create more winners inside. If you exclude many of countries, you create spoiler. That's what it happens. I said yesterday, that because the IMEC excluded Iran, that's why it worked with Hamas to spoil the IMEC corridor. That's why when you include many countries, you save yourself from spoilers. But I don't know how can Trump push the Saudi with their condition. Can he? They are mediator. I won't say they are mediator. They are bringing the Ukrainian, the Russian, and their country to talk together. But they are not the mediator. Same like the Omani. Now they are bringing, supposed to be tomorrow, the Iranian and the American to talk. Mediator, when you initiate the mediation, when you are taking, like UAE, it took the initiative in mediation between Ethiopia and Eritrea. That was, you are here, the mediator really between the other, I think because Ukrainian and Russian, this is maybe the European will not allow them to meet there. Maybe the Saudi is better place to meet. But let's see. But I think if there is no will from the American, from the Russian, from the Ukrainian, nothing will happen for that negotiation. Same between the Israeli and the Palestinian. If there is a real will to reach a deal, to stop the war, we will keep going on. But I think IMEC can go through Egypt, through Suez Canal. You can move on until the Gaza war has been done.
And Anita, so one of the things we've heard from the Prime Minister here in Greece, and he said this in his interview with me, he said this from the stage the other night here at the Delphi Economic Forum, is that this is, again, you have the world's strongest democracy in the United States on one side, the biggest democracy in the world on the other side, in India, the birthplace of democracy, here in Greece, at the center of this whole thing, holding it together. So can you explain for us the strategic view here of that you've got the various democracies of the world linked through one big trade deal?
Yes, this is the reason why, and after what I heard here, it is very important for IMEC and the participating countries to see how this sort of a model has worked in other parts of the world, the successful parts of the world. Southeast Asia was racked by similar kind of tensions, say 60 years in the post-war, and how they have all overcome their difficulties to create an area of peace under which these economic connectivities worked, supported by important economies of the world, Japan, US, and later EU also, and how in this process, interestingly, several of the differences still exist, but economic interests have been sort of superglued onto these strategic differences. And once the benefits of economic prosperity trickle down, the strategic interests have not gone anywhere, and which are also being exploited by different powers of the world in that in the Southeast Asia and East Asia region, which is now being called the Indo-Pacific region. And how these conflicts have been sort of controlled, not conquered, controlled, and economic connectivities and prosperities have been built on top of that, is something which India is also advocating in IMEC, that you don't really have to create a seamless connectivity between India right up till Greece. You can still work in clusters. Southeast Asia still works on their growth models in clusters. You have BIMPIAGA, you have IMTGT, and these are important clusters of growth. You have the Greater Mekong sub-region. Even the Quad, which is a strategic body for all practical purposes, is compelled to speak about new production centers for the digital economy in the Mekong region. And that is because the strategic interests of these clusters then become important. So from that perspective, India is advocating a kind of as many as possible at one time. Energy is a very good example, the kind of grid connectivity that India, UAE, Saudi, they are all working upon at this moment. It is all still at discussion stage, but please understand that none of this is going to work without investments. and no amount of political consensus can bring IMEC into operation without investments. And when it comes to investments, you cannot create firewalls that I like this country's investment, but I don't prefer that country's investment. What is important, therefore, is that how much transparency we build into the systems that we are creating, the clusters of growth that we are creating in this region. And in fact, transparency is one of the foremost reasons why this whole global conversation on resilient and transparent supply chains is what we are having at this point of time. And IMEC is possibly a response to this quest, as I said in my opening remarks. So to that extent, I mean, this is the model through which India and the partner countries, and energy comes foremost to my mind on this because the conversations are fairly advanced on that. Infrastructure follows very closely. Again, it is not a very seamless progress, but it is still happening in clusters, including Pulse in Greece. Marina, my friend here, was present when we were having the first brainstorming, and now we are doing the second brainstorming session on IMEC for creating these policy-based research evidences that will feed back into the conversations. So in clusters, in sub-region mode, that's how the progress is moving forward, at least from the Indian and the close partners in this.
Awesome. And so, Deputy Minister, can you bring us home here? We're almost out of time, but make the closing.
Depends on what is your final goal. If your final goal is pure economics, there are many ways, pure economic reasons, there are many ways to approach it. But if your goal is to create a large part of peace, security, and prosperity for all, there are two ways to approach it, either from bottom down or bottom up. The experiment of the European Union is, after the Second World War, was we created an economic space, and then stability, security, political cooperation followed. And in this way, IMEC follows this trend. Of course, there are differences among countries, strategic differences, and historic differences, all sorts of differences. If you wait to solve the differences first and then proceed with economic, political projects, then it might take forever. It's an approach. I don't dismiss it in my work, but in the European Union, we followed the other way around. And it seems to have been working quite well if you consider a continent that was plagued by wars for 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years, and now countries that have fought each other over and over and over, we cooperate very closely. And if you have differences can with all due respect to the point of view, differences are accentuated when they work in clusters, because the clusters, they tend to focus on their own little world. If you see a bigger picture, and if you see that in the bigger picture you just want one piece, nothing more and nothing less, then sometimes you tend to put the difference a little backward, not that they're solved automatically, and then you move forward. I think this is the prospect of IMEC. Whether it's going to work or not, we don't know. We hope, at least Greece hopes, that it will work, but this is the philosophy behind it, and this is the promise it brings along with it.
All right, well, I think we're out of time here, so I want to thank all of our distinguished panelists, and hopefully, there's more energy behind this, so we'll see what happens going from here. Thanks, everyone.